Hi, and welcome back to our series of lessons on the parts of speech. My name is Ganesh, and this lesson is all about verbs. In this lesson, I will teach you the different types of verbs that we have in English, and I'll also show you how to avoid some common mistakes that students make with verbs. We will start with state and action verbs, and then we'll look at main and helping verbs, and then we'll turn to regular and irregular verbs, and finally, we'll discuss transitive and intransitive verbs. Now, before we begin, as always, if you have any questions at all, you just have to let me know in the comments section, and I'll talk to you there. Okay, so first of all, what is a verb? Well, a verb is just a word that shows an action or a state. State means a situation. And actually, those are the two types of verbs. We call them state verbs and action verbs. Sometimes they're called stative and dynamic verbs, but the meaning is the same. Okay, what's the difference between these two? The difference is that action verbs express physical activities or processes. For example, verbs like kick, shout, run, climb, stand, sit, grow. All of these show us physical activities or processes. But a state verb is a verb that expresses a situation. For example, verbs like be, have, think, like, and own are all state verbs. Now, when I say, I have a large family, here I'm using the state verb have. That means I'm not talking about doing any physical action. I'm just telling you about a situation. In this case, about my family. Or if I said, Julia likes chocolate ice cream. Is Julia doing any action in that sentence? No. That sentence just gives you some information about Julia. We're still using a verb, like, but it's a state verb. Okay, but why is this difference important? And is it important at all? It is, because there's an important rule in English that you should know. And that rule is state verbs cannot be used in ing forms. When you want to use a continuous form, you can only do that with action verbs. Let's look at a couple of examples. Now we can say, the children are playing in the park, or who's shouting? Both of these sentences are correct because the verbs play and shout are physical actions. So we can use ing forms. But we cannot say, I'm having a large family, or Julia is liking chocolate ice cream. Both of those sentences are wrong. They're common mistakes that some students make. Some students use ing forms with state verbs. Please don't make that mistake. And remember, no continuous forms with state verbs. Okay, let's now move on and talk about main and helping verbs. These are sometimes called auxiliary verbs as well. When a verb is used in a sentence, it can be used in two ways. It can either be used as the main verb of the sentence, or it can be a helping verb. That is, it can help the main verb. The most important helping verbs are be, do, and have. Let's look at some examples with these. Luciano is working now. In this sentence, there are two verbs. Can you tell me which are the two verbs? Is and working are the two verbs. Which is the main verb? The main verb is working because that shows the action that is happening. So what about is? What is it doing? Is a helping verb that shows the tense of the sentence. We know that Luciano is working now because we said is. If I said Luciano was working, you know I'm talking about the past. So that helping verb is showing the tense. And that's one of the things that helping verbs can do. They can also help us to form negative sentences. For example, Luciano isn't working now. Or questions, is Luciano working now? In all three of these sentences, the helping verb is be or to be. We're saying is, but that's just a form of the verb to be. We say I am, you are, he is, she is, etc. The verbs do and have can also be helping verbs. For example, I don't play golf every weekend. Maybe I'm talking to my friends and my friends say, hey, you play golf every weekend, right? And I say, no, I don't play golf every weekend. I play tennis, for example. So don't is do not. That's the negative form of the verb do, and it helps me to make a negative. Or my friends could ask, do you play golf every weekend? That's a question. Let's look at an example with the verb have. We have visited the UK 4 times. Here, we know that the main verb is visited, but can you tell me what is the purpose of using have in this sentence? Now, if I told you, we visited the UK last year, in that sentence, I'm talking about one single experience. That is, my visit last year. But when I say, we have visited the UK 4 times, then I'm not talking about any single experience, but I'm talking about life experience. That is, in our lives, we have visited the UK 4 times. That's what the verb have helps us to do in this sentence. Okay, so that's how be, do, and have are used as helping verbs. But take a look at this next sentence. We have a car. Now, both of these sentences use the verb have. But do you notice a difference between them? The difference is that the first sentence uses have as a helping verb, but the second sentence uses have as the main verb. Now you might be thinking, how is that possible? Because have is a helping verb, right? True, but in some cases, be, do, and have can be used as main verbs. Now in this sentence, have is used to mean own. We own a car, is what I'm saying. So in that way, in some cases, these can be used as main verbs, but most of the time, they're used as helping verbs. Another type of helping verb is modals. Modals are these words: can, could, may, might, will, would, shall, should, and must. I'm sure you know these verbs, and I'm sure you use these a lot too. Modals help us to express mood in a sentence. What is mood? In grammar, mood means the attitude of the speaker. That is the feeling I want to convey to you. For example, if I said, the Patriots might win the Super Bowl this year. If you don't know what that means, the Super Bowl is an American football tournament in the US, and the New England Patriots are a team. So I'm making a prediction about the future, and I'm using the modal verb might to do that. Try to read that sentence without might. The Patriots win the Super Bowl this year. It sounds like I'm 100% sure, but that's not what I want to say. I want to say that I'm maybe 70% sure. Okay, so I'm using might. So might adds that mood to the sentence, that I'm talking about possibility in the future. Modals can also express ability, like my sister can play the guitar. In that sentence, play is the main verb and can shows ability. Or if I said, you mustn't smoke here. What's the mood I'm trying to convey? I'm using the modal verb must in the negative, must not, to show that you don't have permission. You mustn't smoke here. So in that way, modals help us to express mood in a sentence. All right, so that's our discussion of main and helping verbs. Let's now move on and talk about regular and irregular verbs. To understand these, you need to know a little bit of background information. And that is that in English, only verbs can have tenses. Of course, you know about past tense, present tense, and future tense. But to make tenses, we change the forms of verbs. Do you know how many forms of verbs there are in English? There are 5 forms. We call these the infinitive or the base form, the present tense form, the past tense form, the past participle form. This form is used in some tenses, and it's also used in conditionals and in the passive voice, so it's an important form. And then we have the ing or the continuous form. Let's take the example of a regular verb, to cook. Its present tense forms are cook and cooks. That's because we say I, you, we, they cook, but he, she, or it cooks. The past tense form is cooked. The past participle form is also cooked, and the ing form is cooking. We say that this is a regular verb because both the past tense form and the past participle forms are just ed endings, cooked. But you cannot do that with an irregular verb, like the verb to go. The present tense forms are go and goes, but the past tense form is not goed, it's went. And the past participle form is gone. Or take the verb to be. It has three present tense forms, am, is, and are. I am, you are, he is, she is. And two past tense forms, was and were, and the past participle form is been. And here's one last example, the verb to read. Its past tense and past participle forms are spelled R-E-A-D, but pronounced red, like the color red. So you might be thinking, well, how can I guess the past and past participle forms of irregular verbs? Well, the answer is you cannot. And that's what it means when we say that a verb is irregular. There's no rule for making the two past and past participle forms. You just have to learn them through experience. So it's a good idea for you to go to your dictionary or to your course book and try to learn as many irregular verbs as you can, because that will help you to use English without making mistakes. All right, let's now move on to our final type of verb, that is transitive and intransitive verbs. Have you heard of these before? Well, they're actually really easy, but they're also important because a lot of students make mistakes in this area. A transitive verb is just a verb that takes an object. What do I mean by object? Do you know? In grammar, the object of a verb is a noun, that is a person, place, animal, or thing that receives the action of the verb. And a transitive verb always takes an object. Okay, I know you might be feeling really confused now. What does all this mean? So I'll show you a couple of examples to help you understand this concept. Now, if I said, Duncan kicked, does that sound a little wrong? Because you might ask me, Duncan kicked what? And I would have to say something like, oh, sorry, Duncan kicked the ball, for example. The ball is the object of the verb kick because the ball receives the kick. And the verb kick is a transitive verb. It always needs an object. Some other common transitive verbs are hit, give, carry, climb, make, kiss, and take. With all of these, if you ask the questions who or what, you will get an answer. Duncan kicked what? The ball. I made a cake. I made what? A cake. She kissed Pablo. She kissed who? Pablo. So that's how you know that these are all transitive verbs. What about intransitive verbs then? Can you tell me what it means to be an intransitive verb? Well, that's a verb that does not take an object. For example, verbs like live, die, laugh, cry, run, sleep, sit, stand. These are all intransitive verbs. They don't take objects. For example, the old man laughed loudly. Notice that in this sentence, there is no object. We're saying the old man laughed, but then loudly is not a person or thing receiving the action. That's just an adverb that gives us information about laugh. So if you ask the questions, the old man laughed who? Or the old man laughed what? You will get no answer. That's how you know that that verb is intransitive. Okay, I told you that students make mistakes with these. What kinds of mistakes do they make? Well, the most common mistake is that students often leave out the object with a transitive verb. For example, students say, the thief climbed and then escaped. Can you identify the error in that sentence? Well, the mistake is that the verb climb is a transitive verb, and you need to say climbed what? You need to say an object. Now, in your mind, you might have a picture of a thief climbing over a wall and then running away. But you need to say that. You need to say the thief climbed over the wall and then escaped. So don't make that mistake of leaving out the object after a transitive verb. Okay, let's now quickly recap what we've learned today. We started with state and action verbs. Remember that state verbs show situations and you don't use ing forms with state verbs. Then we spoke about main and helping verbs. Be, do, and have are the most important helping or auxiliary verbs, but sometimes they can be used as main verbs in a sentence. Modals are another type of helping verb, and they help us to show mood. That's things like possibility, ability, and permission. Then we turn to regular and irregular verbs. The past and past participle forms of irregular verbs cannot be guessed, so you have to learn them through experience. And finally, we spoke about transitive verbs, which take an object, and intransitive verbs, which do not take an object. Do you remember the common mistake that I shared with you? The common mistake is leaving out objects with transitive verbs. Don't make that mistake. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you in the next lesson.